Ladies and gentlemen, before we start, we have an intro video from Honorable Dale Nally, the Deputy Minister of Energy in Alberta, Canada. So let's have that ready, then we'll get to it.
Hello, my name is Dale Nally, and I'm the Associate Minister of Natural Gas and Electricity in the province of Alberta, which is in Western Canada. I'm so pleased to be speaking to you today and to share Alberta's perspective on the past, present, and future of the energy sector, especially as it relates to natural gas and shifts in consumer demand and producer behavior taking place around the globe. Alberta also has a unique perspective on establishing and nurturing a robust energy economy based on natural resources, as well as the people and expertise needed to see those resources used responsibly. I'd like to start by providing some background on Alberta's history and overall approach to building a successful energy sector. Obviously, every jurisdiction in the world has different circumstances, histories, needs, advantages, and challenges. So the path I describe reflects Alberta's experience. I will speak about the approach that has worked for us and talk about how we see that history moving into the future, and I hope this perspective is beneficial as African nations and regions forge their own paths forward. Alberta's connection with the oil and gas sector began shortly after World War II, when the energy sector began growing into one of our largest industries. Despite our relatively small population, we quickly became a key component of the North American energy system, supplying natural gas and oil to customers across Canada and the United States, establishing our role as a major energy supplier, involving many factors, including close collaboration both inside and outside of Canada, and a willingness to work with both industry and the communities impacted by resource development. Alberta's approach to that resource development is quite simple. The resources belong to the people of Alberta, and they should be developed for the benefit of those people. To that end, we have taken a straightforward approach to ensuring Alberta's regulatory system works in a way that supports the responsible development of our energy resources. A large component of that development is private sector investment, wherein energy companies operating in our province pay royalties to the government for extracting resources, thereby reimbursing the Alberta people for their rights to our natural gas and oil. Industry also pays fees to the Alberta Regulator, which, among other regulatory activities, evaluates energy projects and determines if they can proceed. For some background, the Alberta Energy Regulator falls under the jurisdiction of the Minister of Energy, but it's an arm's-length organization independent of government. We also have a strong set of environmental protections in place to ensure companies are responsible for the pollution they emit under the polluter pays principle. In short, we have established a long, strong balance between attracting private sector investment and ensuring public protections, which has been a very positive combination for Alberta and for Canada as a country. Alberta resource royalties have provided billions of dollars of revenue for the provincial government and generated hundreds of billions of dollars of economic activity that have contributed to government spending for decades. Developing sound policies and establishing a solid connection between development and environmental protection only goes so far on its own, though. Alberta is only one part of a larger Canadian oil and gas sector that requires various infrastructure and agreements to move across jurisdictions. As a landlocked province with no access to tidewater, we needed to establish and maintain strong working relationships with other provinces and territories in Canada, as well as state and federal governments in the United States and companies operating across all of these different areas. Collaborating and establishing common interests with partners across national and international boundaries was absolutely key to allow us to build the kind of infrastructure needed to move our energy products to global customers. That kind of collaboration is also key for the future we see in the energy industry, especially in the natural gas sector. There are a number of emerging opportunities to use natural gas in new and growing sectors of the economy, outside of traditional uses like heating and electricity generation. These innovations bring great opportunity, but need to be supported by both industry and the parties who govern in order to move the natural gas industry forward. Petrochemicals are one large opportunity we're actively working towards, using our natural gas reserves to build new petrochemical facilities that the world needs, including medical supplies, computer parts, and plastics. Having that manufacturing base in plastics also offers new opportunity for recycling, which will be another large focus of ours in the coming years. Plastic waste is a huge problem, not just for Canada, but for countries around the world. Having a strong petrochemical sector offers opportunities to develop advanced plastic recycling techniques that require economies of scale. Chances like these to combine economic development with environmental progress are unique to those regions with the natural gas resources needed to make them happen. A great example of these combined environmental and economic goals is in hydrogen, one of the largest opportunities in natural gas and one we've seen significant investment interest in. Since it emits no carbon emissions at the point of use, hydrogen has enormous potential to reduce the carbon footprint of a number of industries. This is especially true in Alberta, where our geological formation allows for carbon capture and storage. Whether it's transportation, heating, or industrial processes, hydrogen being produced from natural gas is an incredible opportunity to meet demands and expectations with existing resources. Hydrogen also has great potential to support the electricity sector, a trait that it shares with the natural gas sector as a whole. Alberta has extensive experience with natural gas in our electricity sector. It has long been an important part of our energy grid. But in the past several years, we have seen this importance grow substantially. In truth, while our supplies of natural gas play an important part in this growing importance, the biggest factors that have influenced the use of natural gas have been tied into our approach to electricity. Alberta operates an energy-only market, where investors can directly build and operate the electricity generation facilities they think will serve the market best. This competitive market approach offers a number of advantages, including the ability for companies to quickly adapt to changing demands and needs. A big example of that flexibility and quick response to changes is the way we are moving to quickly phase out coal-fired electricity. While there was originally a government-directed mandate to end the use of coal and electricity by 2030, our private industry is moving even quicker, and we expect to see the end of coal-powered electricity in Alberta to happen in 2023. While this shift has obvious positive impacts on our environment, it has also led directly to an enormous growth in natural gas-fed electricity generation. Without coal, companies and consumers still need a reliable baseload for electricity generation, and natural gas has stepped up to fill that gap. Within the natural gas generation market, there is a wide mixture of technologies and techniques used by different companies to fit their needs. The most prominent gas generation in our province is cogeneration, where industrial facilities are using heat, steam, or both from natural gas for their industrial processes. At the same time, these sites are producing electricity for their own use, as well as contributing any excess to the larger electricity grid. This option has been a huge success for industry and the average electricity consumer who benefits from the excess power generated by the companies. We also have a number of dedicated gas-to-power electrification facilities operating both combined cycle gas generation as well as simple cycle gas units. It is our flexibility and openness to building well-functioning competitive markets that support these quick shifts and new technologies. As we look to the future, we will continue to look to that combination of sound policy, market-based solutions, and technological innovation to push our energy sector forward. Chemicals and recycling, we are very encouraged by the opportunities that exist for jurisdictions with energy resources and the desire to put them to use. Again, this is only Alberta's example, and there will undoubtedly be a number of paths forward for different regions, companies, and countries. Establishing a system that works for the people of each region is an important component of building a sound energy economy and ensuring those regions can compete on the international stage. I'm very glad to be able to share some of our experiences and insights how we've been able to get the most out of our abundant natural gas resources. And I'd like to thank you again for inviting me to speak today. Take care and have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate. We receive very strong support from the government of Alberta, and they did promise actually that next year they want to drive a discussion between Alberta and Africa, a lot on dealing with onshore oil and gas exploration, given what they have in the oil sands in Canada. And I think that could be a big benefit, especially for countries like South Sudan, tapping into the technology around the oil sands in Alberta and what they have done to be very successful. Coming to the stage is somebody who needs no introduction. Former Congressman Scott Taylor, he's probably famous for being a great Navy SEAL than being a congressman, but he would be leading our discussion today. And I think the congressman has done so much, not only as a congressman, but also post-Congress, really taking on issues around energy security, driving a lot of issues with the U.S. and the international environment on energy matters. Congressman, we are so honored to have you make the time to be here, and I think your remarks would kick off the ministerial discussions with our American counterparts. Congressman Taylor. You guys clap or something? Why is it so boring?
Well, good afternoon. Let's do that again. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. All right, there we go. That's better. Your Excellencies, Ambassador Pham, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. First, I want to go ahead and recognize the tireless efforts and all the hard work of the team of a true champion of Africa energy. Executive Chairman N.J. Ayuk, thank you. Thank you for your great team for putting together this wonderful event. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you so much. Now, it is quite an honor for me to be here in front of you today, here in Africa, here in this beautiful city of Cape Town. It's my first time. As AJ said, I'm a former United States Navy SEAL, a U.S. congressman, but I also spent 4 years in and out of Yemen, running the security apparatus for an American oil company. I would run the security and negotiate in the desert with tribesmen so they wouldn't shoot at us or hijack trucks or blow up pipelines. So I understand the industry and the security, which tomorrow you'll hear from my friend Eric Prince more about private security in the sector, which is necessary. But it was quite an experience for me in Yemen. Let me also start off today by saying that access to affordable, reliable, and abundant energy is a human right for all the people of Africa. But we too must also recognize that the world is changing. And as the old African proverb professes, the chameleon changes color to match the earth. The earth doesn't change colors to match the chameleon. What we should take from this lesson is that global pressures are moving in the direction of net zero carbon, and while we must acknowledge this fact, Africa must take charge of its own transition, of its own future. Another proverb, the strength of the crocodile is in the water. Africa knows what's best for Africa. You know your strengths and you know your weaknesses. And you must stand together, unified, in your demands to the world for a smooth transition for your people. Smothering gas production before African countries have a reliable energy supply would have disastrous socioeconomic impacts. Indeed, There are a lot of people pontificating in rich countries around the world this week about ending fossil fuels. Sure, a worthy goal for the future. But they seem to lack the understanding of the need for this energy in developing economies. They seem to lack the understanding that there are 600 million Africans in energy poverty. But, as I refer to another old African proverb, a roaring lion will kill no one. The challenge here today on this continent is not to be pushed by politicians shouting in the West to flee from the roaring lion into the crouching lion. Meaning, we must not go from a challenging situation to a very dangerous one for the African people. As we heard this morning from His Excellency from Namibia, the energy gap is huge. 1 in 3 people lack reliable energy in Africa. This gap must be closed. The reality is, if you want things to move in Washington, you have to have representation there. After all, it is simply not realistic to call to eradicate carbon use by 2030 when Africa needs to end energy poverty by the same date. It also reminds me of my favorite African proverb, and one that Western leaders need to hear loud and clear. You cannot run and scratch your ass at the same time. Thank you for having me. It's quite an honor. I look forward to answering your questions on the panel. God bless you.
Thank you, Congressman. I would say sit your ass down. I think for those who were watching on CNN actually criticizing some of the speeches from the African ministers, I think a former U.S. congressman speaking and lights going off validates what the African ministers were saying. Energy poverty is real. And CNBC is live streaming this, and I think they've probably been knocked off because the lights just went off in it. So I think the case of the ministers was made by what we're currently going through. But I would like to invite to the stage all the panelists, His Excellency, the Honorable Minister Puot Kang from South Sudan, His Excellency Minister Gabriel Obiang from Equatorial Guinea, Honorable Dr. Ambassador Peter Pham. And we also have Colonel Derek Campbell. Yes. I hope everybody's mic'd up.
Yeah. Yes.
You don't need to get mic'd up, you could shout. We were supposed to have His Excellency Mohamed on from Libya, but he's stuck in a bilateral ministerial meeting, so we would proceed. Without wasting much time, first question, which I would possibly throw it out to those who have not had a chance. This is not just about petroleum, but Dr. Pham, what role do you see the United States playing in the African energy transition and the current dialogue, or what role do you see Africa playing with this, on this discussion?
Well, thank you very much, NJ, and congratulations again for pulling off this event, and it's really wonderful to be back in Cape Town again. I haven't been here since pre-pandemic, the World Economic Forum just before the pandemic, so it's great to be back, and thank you for having us, and for having this event that talks about Africa with Africans in the conversation and in Africa, so I congratulate you for that. I think I'd like to make several points on your question. First, what role does the U.S. have to play? I think when you talk about the United States, we have to disaggregate the government, and within the government, the administration that is currently in office, and separate that certainly from the Congress, where there's a razor-thin majority that the party of the administration, the incumbent administration has, but it is razor-thin. And then also the American people and the private sector, which is an entirely different thing. My good friend, the congressman, has already alluded to some of the policies and orientations that the current administration has taken. The Deputy Presidential Special Envoy for Climate Change was just here last month and gave a rather provocative, I'll use that adjective, speech about regulatory actions against companies that invest here. So it's made its position clear. But there's the American private sector, which seeks to not only do well, but to do so responsibly. I think that's always a ready and willing partner. And I know my good friend Derek Campbell will talk more about that, so I'll defer to him. Secondly, Africa holds a lot of the cards in its hands. And I want to emphasize this. Just take as a premise, if one's goal, and I think it is of all of us, to arrive at a greener economy, to adapt to climate change, then Africa is absolutely critical, both in terms of the raw material that is needed, the critical minerals, the rare earth elements, all those things which are found in abundance. Just to cite one element, cobalt. 70% of the world's current cobalt production is in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So Africa has the material. It also has the carbon sequestration. We now know scientifically as a fact that the montane forests of Central Africa sequester more carbon than the Amazon rainforest. So Africa has two very powerful things in its tool house, and I think those, one uses what tools one has. As a diplomat, that's what one operates with, what the tools one has. So that's my response, very briefly. The United States distinguish between the current administration and Congress, and we have an election coming up in less than a year's time, and that's going to be, I think, very interesting. We had elections in Virginia and New Jersey last week, and they certainly sent a ripple of voter sentiment. And then disaggregate the current administration, the Congress, which I suspect will be changing, and of course the private sector. And then Africa should use the tools in its tool house, which God has given it, to achieve what my good friend the congressman has already said, which is the importance of that human right of access to energy.
Thank you so much. I want to bring in Minister Gabriel Obiang to this. You operate in a country where prior to 2016, all producers in your country were all American. 4 companies. Great history with America. I think without America, you wouldn't be sitting here. They taught you everything you know. And when you hear the current sentiment, which says we are going to penalize companies that invest in your country, what message do you have about the importance of U.S. investment, specifically in Equatorial Guinea? If you were talking to the American private sector, the American politician, or the American civil society, why should American companies not be penalized for investing in Equatorial Guinea?
Okay. First of all, NJ, I want to reiterate it one more time. I want to congratulate you and all the team of the Africa Energy Week for what you guys have done. I say it and I keep saying this is the best platform for us. It's a platform that we can discuss what we are doing, the importance of the resource, but also to tell our story. I think I remember the last time I was in Cape Town, we were the launching of your book. And I said something that I keep saying that is very important, that your story needs to be written by the lion, not the hunter. So if the hunter writes it's going to be bad. So you talk about Equatorial Guinea, somebody who doesn't like it, it's going to be a bad story. But if I have an opportunity for me to be able to explain my story, people will see a different picture. This is the same thing because today it's not a conversation, I already say, it's a shouting match. You try to talk with them, they're just screaming to you. You are a killer of the planet, you are doing this. Why don't you just allow me to talk and I'll explain you why I have a different view. Now, the way I speak, the way Equatorial Guinea speak, I want to be very clear, it's thanks to the US. You go to the US and you go to Michigan, California, Washington, and you talk about Equatorial Guinea, and they have no idea where it is. You give them a map, they don't know. But you go to Texas, go to Houston, and ask about EG. Everybody in Houston know where EG is. And now, why do they know where EG is? Because clearly, Houston and Texas has been responsible for our full development. We were there, a poor country, have nothing. We were just in the middle of the Gulf of Guinea, Nigeria in the north, having all this oil, gas, Cameroon on the east, the same thing, Gabon. We're the one in the middle. And we keep trying, go to Europe, go different places, try to attract investment. Nobody wanted to come. There were one American, this guy, Walter, the typical cowboy. He decided, what the heck, I'll go there and I'll drill one well. And he drilled the same well that the European, and this is a Spanish company, drilled. And thanks to that single well, we have an LNG plant, we have a power plant, we have a methanol plant. The biggest methanol plant in Africa, 3% of the world, is down. And he was the one who changed the entire, he decided, I don't trust those guys. I better go back home, went back to Houston, talk with my friends and explain, this is a place with great potential. They listened to them, Marathon came, United Meridian came, ExxonMobil came, Hess came, and what's the development of Equatorial Guinea? Of course, they can talk about, what Equatorial Guinea is, but go to Equatorial Guinea. We have almost 90% of our country have been completely paved. 90% of electrification. We have power plants by gas before many other countries in our region didn't have it. We have close to 2,000, 3,000 students with a scholarship, trained in Canada, trained in the US. We have transformed our country. And we have actually done one of the biggest per capita investment infrastructure. This was done by the US, by US companies, not the US government. These are the oil traders went there. Because you have to understand one thing. It depends who work with you, what kind of work you do. And those guys, people can say sometimes Americans are too straightforward, they straight into the internet, they don't have friends. You can say whatever. But what they did very good is they're very hard workers. And they tell you very clearly what you need to do if you want to develop. They came to Equatorial Guinea, they guide us. And this is what we do. This is one of the countries with less bureaucracy. You want a business, you present it, and I tell you, yes, this can be done, or I tell you, no, I will not waste your time. But one thing is very important is that if you give your word, do it. You go to anybody, you go to New York and you talk with the banks there, you talk to Houston, they will say, we love EG. I keep telling the same story all the time. Everybody has watched the Wall Street movie. In the Wall Street 2, there is only one country that the guy was talking, it was Equatorial Guinea. It's because you go to New York and you present a project about Equatorial Guinea, everybody jumps in it because they know that these guys, if they sign a contract, they do it. Which is the only country that have been sanctioned in doing the project and going forward, not only exploiting the resources and exporting it, but doing the development. We have the gas, and with the gas, we did electricity, we did methanol, we did the fastest built LNG plant in the world, under budget by Bechtel. It's the best quality. All this development was done. But also what they did, and unfortunately some people don't like it, they injected a little bit the American blood in us. And the American blood is very simple. This is our resources. We'll take our money and we'll do whatever we want to do with it. If you don't like it, it's your problem. You want to leave, you leave.
But let me stop you there, because when you say they injected that, what if all the investments stopped?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. First of all, it will not stop. One of the first reasons that I believe that it will not stop is because it depends with who do you do the business with. Now, I'm very happy that the World Petroleum Congress is going to be happening in Houston. Now, Equatorial Guinea is like Kuwait, it's like Qatar. 90% of our resources is oil and gas. So we're not going to drop this. Now, what we have done, and this is the conversation, is important, is that we have been one of the more responsible, making sure that our products does not pollute. If you go to Equatorial Guinea, our flare is minimum. If you go to Equatorial Guinea, every single one of our resources are being recycled. Even the resources that we use before it goes into the water, it could be the sea, it's already there. So the key thing is, who do you do the business with? Now, if you go around and you talk with people who have different agendas, they will say, well, you cannot do this. The key thing is you go with the people who wants to do the business. And one of the key things that is very important for us, and we're very clear, is who made us. This was the US companies. This was the money of US citizens. This was not really a World Bank and IMF. They keep saying the same thing. Oh, no, IMF is not going to give us funds. IMF is not going to do this. So listen, you never give us anything. You were not here when we did development. You cannot even explain what happened in Equatorial Guinea. A lot of our neighbors, when they come to Equatorial, they get surprised. How did you guys did it without these institutions? And we did it with the people who allow us to do that resources. So I want to say that clearly, and this is the reason that I'm in this panel. Canadians, US, it's not just because I studied in Michigan and I went through the cold. These are the best things that happen in Africa for oil and gas. They came, they gave us the technology. Nobody else wanted to give us the technology. That's the trick. You need the technology. You want to have the people who train your people, teach you how to drill. It's not that they're drilling for you. Teach you how to do the commercialization. Teach you how to, and this is what they have done. ExxonMobil, Marathon, Hess, all of these have done it. And these are the people in Houston. So if there is one place that I'm going to continue oil and gas, it's going to be Houston, Texas. And I know that they're already talking about maybe separating from the US. I hope it doesn't happen. But again, there's enough banks there in Texas that will be willing to go there. But the clear thing, and this is for me something that is very important to defend and be very clear. Equatorial Guinea has been developed and have grown thanks to the US investment, thanks to the oil and gas men and women in the US that not only have come make money, because we also make money, they train our people. They were there and in the ministry coming, Mr. Minister, no, that's not the way you do it. You have to do it like this. Right now, they were the one who taught us how to do contracts. They taught us how to do the electricity, not just to be there. They said, listen, one day we'll finish, we'll go. And if you come to Equatorial Guinea, you will see many Equatorial Guinea youth who are doing. An example with this is ExxonMobil. They can criticize ExxonMobil as much as they want. When we have the COVID pandemic, you know what happened? They couldn't move the expats. They couldn't bring equipment. And they decided, just with our people in Equatorial Guinea, we're going to operate up here. So for 5 months, our entire installations of ExxonMobil were operated by 100% nationals for Equatorial Guinea, from the helicopter, from the rest. And who doesn't believe they can come, but it's true. So I want to insist that clearly this is where we will continue. We'll continue talking with them. I mean, we still want the Chinese money, we still want the European money, but clearly what they have, the one who have proved to us has been the funds from the US. And again, I'm not going to go into US politics, that's not my issue. For me, the only place that US that I know is Houston, Texas, and that's exactly where I will go. Any other place, you know, I could go just for visit, but clearly with the business is in Houston.
I think if you're from Exxon or Marathon, Minister Obiang just cut you a commercial. Better than anyone you've ever done. But and while building on this narrative, I'm going to bring in Honorable Minister Puot Kang from South Sudan. This is another country which most might say you are an American creation. But also, like what you said this morning, you don't want anybody to go through what South Sudan has gone through. Your industry right now is currently under US technology restrictions. And I've heard you speak about your willingness to engage with American companies to have them invest in your country. I want to also give you a chance to address a similar question. How are these restrictions affecting your ability to enact your pro-growth initiatives you want for your oil sector, Minister?
Well, thank you so much, NJ. Let me join those who appreciated the initiative and as well as the invitation for us to be able to be here and maybe meet some of the faces that we've never seen in our lifetime. Before I answer the question, I want to take you through a very short history. I will not go into detail, but it will be able to tell you why are we here today. The first oil in the Sudan was discovered by Chevron. And in the process, Chevron pulled out, and that gap was closed by the CNPC of China, the Petronas from Malaysia, and ONGC from India. When they came in at a time when Sudan was at war by itself. And Sudan happened to be under sanction. Sanctions were imposed on Sudan by the US in 1997, which the Sudanese authority by then were left with no choice because they were in need of money to fight the war. They were left with no choice than to go to the east. And definitely, they got the Chinese who were ready to put in money so that they can fight the war with South Sudan today. By then, we were Southern Sudan. When that history happened, when we came and signed CPA, which we are very appreciative of, as you put it, without the support and the help from the United States, we may not reach such a milestone. We have signed an agreement in Kenya that allows us, in that agreement, to have a choice to make, a referendum, to either be an independent state or be part of the bigger Sudan, unity and succession. Come 2011, South Sudanese by 98% voted for an independent state. And that's how we became South Sudan. Now, the agreement, that is the CPA, said in case we choose to be an independent state, we must recognize all those agreements which were signed by the Sudan. So we inherited already made agreements between the Sudan and all of those companies that I told you earlier. So we became an independent state, and we were left with no choice than to have those agreements in place. We move on. Come 2013, a mistake happened. A civil war in the country happened. And in the process of that civil war, a lot of mistakes were committed in one way or the other. There were also a lot of perceptions and assumptions which others perceived toward us. But there were also our own mistakes that we committed, and in the process, we found ourselves under sanctions. Today, the Ministry of Petroleum that I represent myself as an institution is under the entity list. The oil companies that are operating, they are under entity list. Our take has been, yes, there was a mistake. But here is a country.
I just want you to park for a minute. And I want you to turn right to Dr. Pham and Congressman Taylor. In 1 minute or 2 minutes, what would you tell them why you should get off that list?
That's what I'm coming to. There was
I want to look at them in the eye. Dr. Pham is really looking at them like
there were mistakes. We happen to be under the entity list. But you need to look at a country called South Sudan, not individuals who are there occupying seats today. I'm today a minister. I may commit my own mistakes, but it does not mean South Sudanese have committed a mistake. And with this being said, you cannot punish a one-day-old child because of a mistake that is committed by a 50-year-old man, because that child is very innocent. What am I trying to say? Is that the operation that we have today have a lot of difficulties simply because you cannot buy a spare part from Germany and expect that spare part to arrive on time in the Republic of South Sudan. You cannot do that in Italy and expect it to arrive on time in the Republic of South Sudan. And in the process, we lose money. And our budget depends on oil by 98%, meaning a woman, like I said earlier in the morning, who's supposed to deliver in a hospital will miss to be attended to by a midwife simply because he or she was not paid. And if that person was not paid, this woman will have difficulty delivering in the hospital because nobody is attending to her. And the future of this country may be changed by that child tomorrow. So what am I trying to look at? What I'm trying to say is, when we came, we have made licensing wrong. We did not want to give a block under the table to anybody. And what we were saying is that we want to diversify the sector. Because today, my friend here in the morning, I was saying that we are the least contributor. In fact, we contribute nothing because we have nothing. When he was telling me some of the things that they have in Equatorial Guinea, next time somebody come to me and tell me, you stop production, I will tell him, go to Equatorial Guinea. Because at least he has something. I have nothing, literally. I literally have nothing. And therefore, I need to diversify oil sector for the benefit of our people. Yes, governance, if you look at the US, and I think the congressman will agree with me, there are three things that people will talk about: governance, ethics, and security. Somebody will say, if I go to Africa, well, they are not ethical. They are so corrupt. They will do A, B, C, D, E. I wanted to say, I might be corrupt today, or Mr. X may be corrupt tomorrow. But the generation that is coming today in Africa, they are working so hard to make sure they minimize corruption. And those who would continue to practice that will not take my time to be sitting here as ministers in some time to come. So let us not look at Africa or South Sudan of today. I'm saying Americans, Canadian, or any other person need to look at South Sudan of tomorrow. What kind of a country will it be tomorrow? And that is a kind of a country that we all need to address ourselves to, so that when we talk of development, South Sudan or any other country in Africa is not left behind. Now, the last things that I want to address, and I said it in one of the panel earlier, is this question of somebody saying, well, you must now reduce or stop production, maybe by 2030. Today, South Sudan remain untapped by 90%. Nothing has been done. And I said earlier, when you tell me stop doing that, you are basically saying you should not have a hospital, you should not have a school, and your children and grandchildren must continue to struggle the same way you did. I was a refugee myself, and so many of my generation, because they were born during the war. We would not wish our children and our grandchildren to go under the same condition. Somebody will say, well, the world is changing. We must adapt to the new world because human life is being affected. But another dangerous thing that is not being talked about is the absence of making use of these resources that we have today. Where will you get the money to develop these countries? And if you don't do that, there is an immediate damage. What is it? An hungry man is an angry man. Meaning, I have no food in the stomach, I will have to go and look for a food. Whether I steal it, whether I grab it by force, I will have to do that. For you to prevent that from happening, you must balance between COP26 and the developmental need of a developing nation like the Republic of South Sudan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister. I'm happy you did bring up the issues about capital coming in to meet this balanced need. And Derek, I just want to come to you if I go to Congressman. What would it take for U.S. capital to meet exactly what the minister is saying to get exposed more into African energy markets? How can that work?
Well, NJ, I would say that it would take events just like this, and I'm really proud of you and your team for making sure that the African story and narrative is being told globally, but specifically with the focus on folks in my country back in the United States. And I would tell you that what American or North American folks need to continue to see is even at the small, medium enterprise level, right, that capital, sources of capital, not big mega projects, but even the other types of projects, there's a safe investment return regime, there's a safe environment based on some of the things that we do, and also there is an opportunity to showcase a success, right, to really push down the barriers, push down the walls so that other U.S. companies, not just big companies, but small to medium-sized enterprises can invest their capital in technology as well. And I think a continued push about the narrative, about, when you talk about Africa, what do you hear? You hear that everybody in Africa is corrupt, it's not safe, you can't get your money repatriated back out of countries. That is not true. If that were the case, writ large, then the ExxonMobils, the Marathons would not have been able to do what they do. Yeah.
If you're looking at the screen right now and you're talking to a small, mid-sized U.S. business, can you pitch to them this continent?
Yeah.
What are the energy, what can they do as a small, mid-sized company instead of the Exxons of the world and everything with their capital in Africa, more specifically?
I can. What I would say is partner. Do the homework, do the engagement, find partners, your equivalents, your partners, your somebody in a particular market who has a desire to say, hey, come work with me, right? Small, medium-sized enterprises aren't going to maybe have the success that they want to have working with government. But I guarantee you that there is a small, mid-sized, wildcat type of guy in Equatorial Guinea, in Nigeria, who is looking for a partner. And when you have that partner on ground, he will help you mitigate the risk that you take when you go into these countries.
Thank you. And Dr. Pham, I'm listening to these ministers speaking, I'm listening to Derek. What's the American hesitance? We're seeing today divestment and transition, and we're seeing also that the financing of American technologies in Africa has declined. Is it a risk issue or a geopolitical issue, or are we just confused?
I would say, generally speaking, as Derek was just alluding to, and I think the Minister Obiang was saying earlier, your best advertisement is a success story.
That's right.
An American company, a Canadian company, an outside investor who has been able to do business and to succeed in your country. That's your very best. The flip side of that is your worst nightmare is a single investor who has been cheated or expropriated or somehow pushed out by corruption or business. One of those will undo 10 others of the other ones.
That's right.
So I think that's important to keep on. And reputation, we all know this. You're men of politics in the state. Reputation is everything. At the end of the day, it takes a lot of work to gain reputation, and it can be lost in a moment. And, you know, I feel for what the minister said when he talked about that woman in the, you know, lacking the clinic. But, you know, most Americans, and this is from both sides of the party, as the minister probably knows, just last month, in our very bitterly divided U.S. politics, a bipartisan bill was introduced by both the Republican minority and the Democratic majority, demanding that the U.S. government revisit its entire policy with respect to South Sudan. And it wasn't to remove the sanctions, it was to tighten them. And how did that happen? How did that happen? It's reputational. The fact is, I'll look to the minister, when the government itself, when President Salva Kiir admits that $2 to $4 billion was stolen, and we know that some of the people who stole are still there, it's very hard to live that down.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not saying the minister is new to his function. He's the junior, if you will, among the ministers here. He didn't cause the problem, but he has to live with that legacy. May not be fair, may not be optimal, but that's the reality. So reputation is everything, and your best advertisement is success. And that's the.
Derek, I know you have a comment before I go to Congressman.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things to, you know, to expand on this story of success is this. Americans need to understand and see that success. It needs to be a part of a narrative that's told to them by Africans. But really, the Africans need to understand, back what Dr. Pham said earlier about the Africans are in the driver's seat on this issue, that Americans need to understand at the government strategic level, this is also about national security of the United States and the West, right? Partnering with Africa as we go through things like energy transition. And the same token, Africans need to understand there is no partner better than the Americans, as we saw in Equatorial Guinea, when it comes to access to capital, when it comes to free market paradigms that can exist to help not just an industry, but a country, right? And you replicate that over and over and over again. And so one of the things I kind of beseech you to do is, and your team, is continue to tell the narratives about the success, because the capital markets in the United States are sitting on the sideline really wanting to get into Africa. They're looking for the right partners. And we need to be able to tell the story that the partners exist. So that money in New York, that money in Washington, not DFI money, I'm talking about foreign direct investment, that's capital money out of the capital markets, can start to pour into Africa. And I will say this, why it's important for America, not to dismiss our Canadian brothers. And you've heard me say this before. It is unconscionable to me that the United States would have a challenge having a hegemonic pole position in the continent of Africa when 80 to 90 million of our citizens are of African descent. In Russia and China, they don't have as many people as we do who are of African descent. So we've got to get that narrative. We've got to create that diasporal engagement so that we can see the money pour in to see the growth that's required to attract more American businesses into the marketplace.
Congressman, I want to bring you in here. I think Derek and the ministers have raised a very important point. But you sitting as a former congressman, if you're going to look at a country, whether it is South Sudan, whether it's Equatorial Guinea, from a regulatory perspective, what goes into your thinking when it comes into enhancing relationships with this country, driving U.S. investments, or even or somebody walking to you, talking to you about them? What goes into your head, and how do you get into your decision-making process to say, this is it, I should either support the investments of a company or appreciate what this country is doing, or like what Dr. Pham said, try to put more sanctions or try to lift sanctions. How do you guys go through that process, and is it just like, well, tough luck, whoever talks to you first, you decide?
From a policy perspective.
Jeez, I hope not. Is this working?
You're good.
There's a lot to unpack in this panel. I love it, actually. Let me first say, NJ, excuse me. Let me first say that I love the story of Equatorial Guinea. I think it's an amazing story that shows, as Derek said, there is no better partner than the United States, China, There is no better partner than the United States. I would love to see that story repeated in South Sudan.
Thank you.
I would love to see it repeated in South Sudan and across the continent of Africa. Yeah, clap on that, absolutely. You know, I'm going to start with the private sector, and then I'm going to go into the public sector. That's okay. I think it's important to understand, and when you're, you know, a lot of the folks that in the private sector, the big companies, the Chevrons, the Exxon Mobils, a lot of those companies are in the conversation for moving towards, you know, net carbon zero. They're the ones that that are on TV and talk and everything like that. But as it was discussed a little bit earlier, look, Americans are capitalists. There's plenty of people, probably, you know, God bless Texas and Texas, that would be more than willing to come over and be wildcatters and partner locally to help bring technology here and exploit resources and help grow these countries. No question about it. And then, look, Americans are capitalists, so if they come there and there's a good deal, it's transparent, everything's there, there's going to be people who will flow money into those deals. It might not be easy, but one of the things when I look up here, I've noticed there is a lack of American companies. And that hurts my heart, because we should be here. And I know that NJ is doing a fantastic job, and you've created this base. I can't wait to go home and tell people to come back here, and these companies to come here next year to speak to the decision makers, to get into these countries and help folks out and make money, everyone making money, and raise up the standard of living and deal with that energy poverty. But one of the things that you have to understand, the private sector and those small companies, they don't know. They might not know about the opportunities, right? So my suggestion for the African countries here, you need to go on an American roadshow. You need to go on a roadshow, and you need to identify and figure out where those wildcatters are, whether it's in Houston or Louisiana or other places, Pennsylvania. Try to identify the people and the companies and the leaders that will take that risk, because there are plenty of Americans who will do that.
Congressman, you're saying on an American roadshow, what would you tell South Sudan when they get to America and forget the politics?
Yeah.
You have the best technologies in the world.
Sure.
You want him to transition, but you're telling him, my technology is not allowed for you. And you say you're the best partner, but China says, I'll give him technology. You're telling him, my technology, I have a restriction on you.
Understood.
So,
I'm going to get to that in a second, if that's
all right.
okay.
I want to make sure you don't forget that.
I won't forget, I promise. One other quick story on the private sector to illustrate what I'm saying. The company that I worked for in Yemen was Hunt, right? So Hunt goes into Yemen when no one was there. No one was there. It's Yemen. I don't know if you've been to Yemen before. It's not an easy place to do business. It's not an easy place to understand the culture. When you're in there, it's all tribal. It's very interesting and challenging. But he went there, found oil, and he was nobody from Texas, and just was a wildcatter in there, and it made that country financially. They benefited tremendously. The skill there, the technology's there. So. It still has challenges. We all understand that. But what I'm saying, for that one Hunt, there are plenty of them in America who would be willing to come here. No question about it. And they should be here. They should have their logos right up there. Now let's get to the public sector real fast. So, yeah, I don't know all the details on the sanctions piece. I'm interested to speak with you afterwards about that for sure. I believe personally that oftentimes we are sanction heavy. We use sanctions too much around the world, because when you use sanctions, you're trying to change a behavior. But oftentimes, the bureaucrats in Washington will put sanctions on, that are approved by the politicians, and they just stay there. They're not monitoring them. They're not giving space to change the desired behavior. And that's a flaw in my opinion, quite frankly. When you look at sanctions, there are a couple ways that they happen. Of course, you have the State Department has bureaucrats in there. They're gonna do their research, and they're gonna put sanctions on for whatever reason. Or you have the Congress that can do it. Now, let me talk about the Congress. And this is because I know it. In the United States, the Congress has oversight. So we have the three branches of government, of course, and Congress has oversight power. Congress actually has a lot of influence. it can be brought to bear to influence over the executive branch, over the agencies that are putting sanctions on. Like, they have to come, like, no agency likes congressional pressure. None. They don't like to get phone calls from congressmen and women and senators. They don't like that. I mean, they can call them out, they can put them there and grill them. They don't like that. They don't like the pressure. The challenge is, and the challenge for Africa in Congress is making them aware and educating them. And let me give you let me expound upon that a bit. The positive thing about the United States Congress is that it represents the people. And they come from all different walks of life. So that is the good thing about it and the bad thing. And what I mean by that is you have a great representative body that has people from all walks of life. That can also be very challenging. If we're talking about dental policy, I don't know anything about dental policy, but we probably have a dentist in Congress. We probably don't have many people in Congress who understand Africa, who really understand Africa. So what happens oftentimes, to your question, is sometimes legislation will be brought up through the respective committee, the Foreign Affairs Committee, and the other Congress people rely on them if they don't have the expertise, which many of them do not. Someone mentioned up here that they couldn't point the country out on a map. That's true. That's true. Unfortunately, but it is true that there are many people in Congress who don't know about South Sudan's energy poverty, about the fact that, listen, they're actually, you're getting more pollution because, and also it's unhealthier because they're burning charcoal as opposed to utilizing natural gas and so on and so on. So my suggestion and my challenge to you, African nations, is you have to have representation and a presence in U.S. Congress, because that's where you institutionalize your needs, your desires, your wants, your partnerships. Yes, Congress changes, but you still have to you still have to educate those folks in U.S. Congress, because they can be helpful to you, because they can put pressure on agencies, or they can put good and bad, right? They can say, hey, listen, South Sudan's changed. They got new blood in here. He's not corrupt. There's no corruption here. They know they've made mistakes. They're trying to remedy. They're changing their behavior. Therefore, let's get the sanctions off, right? So you have to tell that story. Mm-hmm. And the reality is, in U.S. Congress, when it comes to South Sudan, unless they're dealing with on the respective committee, the Foreign Affairs Committee, and even in that subcommittee, South Sudan's not in their mind, because they got all kinds of other things that are going on, right? Like their constituent services, whatever their committee is, like all kinds of other things. And when you're in Congress, U.S. Congress, it's extremely busy, extremely busy. But I think you have to tell the African story, and you have to do it with confidence. You have to go to the West, and you have to say, listen, we're all united here. We all know we want to get rid of energy poverty in this continent, and we want your help, because we know that you're the best partner that we can have with technology and help and financing, much better than China, much better than China, much better than China. But I'm here because of my good brother here, and I hope to bring more U.S. companies here to tell the story in Washington, and so on and so on. So thank you. Mm-hmm.
I think we heard the China thing a little bit too much. But I want to go to the two ministers. I'll come back to you.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Back to what the congressman is talking about, engaging with the public sector and the private sector. I've heard roadshows, I've heard engaging with Congress and the American public. Are we missing something? Because you are two ministers. You represent and you have a voice that speaks to the needs of a lot of Africans, and even our generation. And Minister from Equatorial Guinea, you still think you're young, and I mean, the guy is 50, calls himself young. You have a young brother from South Sudan. What are we missing? And what are you guys not doing, and what would you be doing so that we can connect Scott and Derek, what Derek said and what Dr. Pham said? Because a lot of Africa is looking at both of you on this transition, but also the engagement of our generation.
NJ, let me explain you one thing that we need to remember. I have entered into this industry, coming from the school directly, And what I have learned about oil and gas is that it goes through cycles. It goes up and goes down. Now, I have a prediction. And my prediction is that the congressman, you're not going to have to do a lot of work. The Americans are coming back. They're coming back. So it's not what we're going to do. They're coming back. You have to remember that in the last cycle, the Africa oil and gas discoveries were done by independents. It was not done by ExxonMobil, Marathon, Chevron. They were independents. They went to Senegal, they went to Equatorial Guinea, they made the discovery, and then they brought the majors. Now, what happened after that? Shale gas. What happened? For the first time, the US found a new technology that they can recover the resources, and quicker, and better. So they went back to Texas, to Iowa. They did all the work. Why? Because they were also a regulating frame in the state that allowed them to do that. Now, what's happening now? Everything is changing. That's why when I'm going to Houston, I'm very confident that all those guys who make a lot of money in the shale, they're going to come back. Because they have to spend their money. And they need to think, where are going to be the spending of money? And now it's what he's saying. The Africans need to prepare because they need to go there and present to all those independents. These are not people driven by Washington, by IMF. They have their money. So they are the ones sitting there in Texas and saying, what should I do with my billions? Should I just sit here and wait? Because I'm not going to take it to New York, not Washington. So he said, listen, Equatorial Guinea is there. You come, you invest, you do this. And that's exactly what happened the last time. The Walter, the United Meridian, the rest.
Minister, are you saying that current U.S. policies are going to, instead of increasing American production, it would push American companies to come?
I'll tell you what happened. And I'm not an expert, but some of them, they will say that I'm
too diplomatic.
No. What happened is that the oil companies were run by oil men and women. When the shale industry came, it switched from oil drillers to bankers. The bankers are the ones running the oil companies now in Texas. So a lot of the former oil men and women, they left the companies. If you go, and again, I'm not going to name the company because I know them, they're working in Egypt. Half of the guys who make the discovery in Equatorial Guinea don't work in the companies anymore. They decide to leave because they say, that's not what we have been taught to do. We are not taught to do trucks, to do all these chemicals going down. We are taught to do drilling. We want green fields. And all of them, they decide, I'm leaving. And you know where all of them they are? Abu Dhabi. You know where I'm going next week? Abu Dhabi. Everybody's there. All the former guys from ExxonMobil, Chevron, Schlumberger, they're working for Abu Dhabi.
Now you just mentioned the name.
Yes, sorry. So the issue here is economic.
That's right.
It's job creating. And I'm very confident that what happened in the US, and this is why we are confident that Equatorial Guinea, it was, and it will always be an ally with the US because we create jobs. We create jobs for Equatorial Guinea. We create jobs from the US, the biggest ally. If one day the US decide that, listen, we don't want to work with you anymore, that's fine. We go to the Chinese. And the Chinese will come. But I can bet you with my good brothers in the state, they know the potential of Equatorial Guinea. They know our history. And they clearly know if Americans are still in Nigeria, and I'm a neighbor in Nigeria, and I can tell you it's not easy, it's because they clearly understand that that's the potential. And they also understand that it's a resource that the country needs to develop. So, and one of the key things that I insisted, and people criticize all the time to the US, they are the more fair ones. The US come to the country and they say, listen, this is your resources, I'll take this, you take this, and we'll be happy. They will never try to cheat you because they know that they have their own regulation to do that. They'll come, they take, and they say, this is your money, you do whatever you want to do with the money. And this is what in Equatorial Guinea I learned. I'm not going to name, again, the countries that they don't work like that. But this is what a lot of people in our region, excluding Nigeria, have been asking. How come that little countries have been able to develop when we have been working with, again, these European countries or European companies? Because I'm being very clear. The biggest problem that some of the US companies and even congressmen that are there, they're listening to the news that come from Europe. And I can tell you, if you write a report coming from Spain or France about Equatorial, it's going to be rubbish. It's going to be rubbish. They're going to be talking about all this. But when the Peace Corps was in Africa, the U.S. used to send young universities to go to Africa and find out what, and they were coming back to the U.S. and tell you, that's not real, that's not true. Why? Because the Europeans were biased. The Europeans were in Africa. You know, they have their own agenda. America have a different agenda. America is not interested to run a country. But when you go in the country and you say, oh, this report in Spain said this, report said this, where's the report coming from? And I have to be very clear because that's what we are going through. The report, the majority come from Europe.
I don't want to get you in trouble. I'm
So
going to stop you there.
that's to be very clear of my view.
I'm going to bring a minister from South Sudan, then Dr. Pham real quick.
Well, thank you so much once again, NJ. And it's really an opportunity for me to sit in this forum representing.
You know you're live on CNBC.
Yes, representing millions of South Sudanese outside there who are feeling the pain in one way or the other more than I do. And I would like to appreciate the comment made by Dr. Fannon and the congressman. And I would like to take them through a very small and a very short history. During the CPA, before we signed Comprehensive Peace Agreement in 2005 with Bashir, by then in the Sudan, late, and a man that, and you cannot believe, most South Sudanese, when former Secretary of State passed away recently, so many people mourn him, Colin Paul. They cried. He would fly to Nairobi with Hilda Johnson from Norway and hold Kalonzo Musyoka, who was the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Kenya, and said, I need to meet John Garang, I need to meet Alois Mantha, and said, there must be an agreement in the Sudan. They did not do that because they wanted John Garang to be a first vice president. They did that because they wanted a peaceful Sudan, where a refugee, a young man who grew up in a refugee camp like myself and millions outside there, will have the opportunity to come back home and work for my own future and the future of my own country. That was the whole reason. United States, in that process, he spent $1 billion+ for somebody to get a textbook, an exercise books that will be cut into two, and it is written at the back of it, USA. They spent billions of dollars so that some of us could go to his school, come back home, and serve South Sudan. Now, I'm coming to the comment that you made, which is very true. But here is the irony part of it. $4 billion was stolen by some people. The population that we have today is estimated to be more than 15 million people. The few that were in the government, they do not reach 100,000 people. Now, these people that we are talking about, they are more than 15 million. And what I'm trying to say is, you have a situation where this money got disappear, the country went to a conflict, you have refugees, you have internally displaced person. The same United States that is saying, I cannot give you the technology because you are corrupt, is again spending billions of dollars to feed the refugees, to feed the internally displaced person. Before Donald Booth, who was the special envoy, retired, I had opportunity to discuss with him. And I say, look, If I go to a hospital and the doctor tell me that you have malaria or typhoid, and instead of giving me the medicine for malaria or typhoid, you give me Panadol because I have fever as a result of malaria or typhoid, what will he be doing, or she be doing, that doctor? You will be treating the symptom, not the disease itself. Meaning, the US today is spending money on feeding the refugees and the internally displaced person, while some of us feel that we have the opportunity to sit on a table and say, look, let's discuss the future, not the Minister of Petroleum who is sitting here today. Because if today I'm being told you are corrupt, and yesterday I did not take the money, I would not want a young girl who is 1 year old today to be told in 20 years' time that you are corrupt. I want to help the future of that young lady or that young man so that tomorrow they may have the reputation that they deserve to be able to speak in the eye of the world. And that is the situation that we would all have to create. Because if we don't create that situation now, how will it look like tomorrow? Somebody will have to pay the price for a mistake that they have not committed. Somebody told me from the US, an individual, he told me, look, you chose to work with America, with China. I told him, no, I did not choose to work with America. But the agreement, and we give credit to the US for that, recognizes the agreement which we made before the CPA. And I end up with the agreement that was signed when I was not there by somebody. But there is still opportunity. You heard me saying we have 5 blocks, but we have 13 blocks in total. And we are saying we are inviting anybody to come, provided that you will do it differently this time. And that's what we want to see.
Will you
Now,
be engaging U.S. companies in that effort?
That's where I'm coming to. You invited me to come to Houston, and immediately I wrote a letter requesting for a visa. If I and my delegation are given the opportunity to come, we will come. I will be ready, and so my team will be ready to sit down not only with private companies, with individuals, but we will also be ready to even sit down with men and women who are part of the government today, if they are ready to do so. Because, honestly speaking, these 2 gentlemen are South Sudanese. They are my technical advisors, him and him. They are old. They have been there when this industry started in the Sudan. What am I trying to say? Him, he was a governor. We used to hear about him long ago. We thought we will not get there. Today, I find myself dealing with the same issues. Meaning, we will not be happy for our children, myself, and our grandchildren to feel the same. And when it comes to change of attitude, somebody will say, we impose sanctions because we want people to change their attitudes. I might decide not to change my attitude today, but it does not mean my daughter will behave the same way I do. But my daughter will only behave the same way I do if that daughter, she is not given the opportunity to go to school. If she is not given the opportunity, to have the exposure. Somebody may sit somewhere and say, Cape Town is not a beautiful city because they don't know Cape Town. But if somebody have the opportunity to come to Cape Town, there are few things that they don't know where they are that they will be able to know. If those kids are given the opportunity to go to school, they will be able to understand the world. They will be able to make different choices. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say the resources that are underground must be explored, produced, used as an engine of growth for the next generation to come.
Thank you, Minister. I'll let
Thank you so
Pham
much.
come in. and then Derek, and then we go and close it before these guys kill me.
I'd like to tie in two points made by the Minister of Equatorial Guinea and my friend Congressman Taylor. And that is, and this applies to you, Minister, if you go, get out of Washington. You know, we joke in America that Washington is a swamp, but it literally was a literal swamp. And when I used to be a university professor, I used to tell my students that if we were a developing country, we would have, someone would have come along and wanted a commission of inquiry on how it was that the Capitol was sited in the middle of a swamp right across the river from the first president's property, which increased in value once the Capitol was put right across the river from him. So I think, as an American, I have to say, we would do well to have a bit of that perspective when we approach the world. That being said, I think both the Minister and Scott had very good points. Get out of the swamp. Go out, and the Minister talks about going to Houston. But the small, medium companies that Derek talks about, some are in the Texas area, and Texas certainly is attracting a lot of companies, even companies, big names are moving out of other states to go there because of more favorable business conditions. But get out there, because I don't know the sheer number of the years. Now, I live in the swamp. I'm probably accused by someone, even my own party, of being a swamp creature. But that's not Washington. How many African leaders come and address supposed business meetings in Washington? Well, the only people who are attending those meetings, let me the secret in there, are people who do government relations, and nothing wrong with it. It's an honorable profession, but they're not the people making the investment decisions. Those people are out in the middle, the heartland, and the West Coast, in the South. They're elsewhere. So you can give all the presentations you want. They'll applaud you very nicely, and a nice picture you can send home. But no business will be transacted there. So get out, and that applies also politically. We have 435 members of the House of Representatives, 100 senators. They're out there, and this is the other thing I would say to all the Africans here. The African diaspora, and I've, for whatever strange reason of providence, I've spent my entire career working on Africa. And the African diaspora, your brothers and sisters, your cousins, are not as politically active as perhaps they ought to be. That's advertisement. And they have considered, members of Congress will listen to diaspora groups when they speak up. And they're part of the storytelling. And so my encouragement is get out of Washington, engage America in its private sector, in its government, outside, and that's where you'll begin to change the narrative. If you come back, it's very often same old, back in the swamp.
I think you're right about the diaspora. They should learn to be like Tim the Irishman. Always an Irishman. Welcome, Tim O'Brien. Everywhere he goes, there's an Irishman in the house. Doesn't matter. He gets in a room with Americans. He tries to still be Irish and everything. So you okay, me boy? But I'll pass it to Derek. Then we'll get closing remarks.
Sure. So for me, the narrative that we're talking about is really important. I'm an American businessman. I have been in South Sudan. I have been in Equatorial Guinea. My family went to Equatorial Guinea and built a business, and my family has a good story about Equatorial Guinea, how they helped build a telecom infrastructure there. I'm an American military man. I served in South Sudan with the UN. I have been in other places in the Middle East. And so there is opportunity in the emerging markets, particularly Africa, that needs to be highlighted. It needs to be showcased so that, if I could be self-serving and selfish about it as an American, I think there are opportunities for Americans, especially American small businesses, where they are suffering, trying to find new ways to create opportunities at home, when there is an entire continent that is saying, we welcome your participation, we welcome your money, we welcome your technology, we welcome your friendship, let's work together. And I will tell you this, once I entered markets and started finding friends, I was able to grow my businesses. Some of these men on this stage have talked to me before. Dr. Pham, you and I have talked about this for years. It is about two things, a key narrative, and that narrative has to be built on success stories that are replicated over and over again. And as I said to you before, and I'll end with this, for me as an American, again, self-serving, talking about my country, we have 80 to 100 million of our citizens genetically hail from the continent of Africa. How is it possible that the United States is having difficulty establishing a hegemonic pole position in the continent of Africa with its near-peer competitors? And I won't mention who those are, but we've already talked about it, right? And so,
I think the congressman said China.
yeah, right. He's a congressman, he can say it.
I'll pass to Minister Gabriel, then we'll just go around for.
Okay, I'll just say one last thing. We do, and sometimes it just reminds me, we are actually more like Texans. I mean, in Equatorial Guinea, even a lot of our people speak, Texan. It's not English. Half of the people have studied in Texas. We have clearly relationship and alliance with universities in Houston. People have gone in Austin. I mean, every single governor, state knows Equatorial Guinea. And one thing that we have been done, and this is, I would say that Equatorial Guinea sometimes is a little bit rebel thanks to the Texans, the Americans.
That's
And
why
I
he
see
likes
with this
country
because
music.
we don't apologize.
Country music guy.
And I will never apologize for developing our resources. The God-given resources, it's there. That given resources, the Almighty have given us for a reason. And that reason...
That's President Trump calling, just turn it off.
So that God-given resources were put for a reason.
That's right.
It was for a destiny. Equatorial Guinea used to be one of the poorest countries in our region. And right now, everybody talks about it. And it was because we developed that. So for anybody to say, well, you should be sorry because fossil fuel, we'll never apologize. This is our resources. These have changed Equatorial Guinea completely. It wasn't the World Bank. It wasn't the IMF. It wasn't no savior. It was our resources. And it wasn't really the Americans. The Americans just brought the technology. We did all that development. So for me to come and say, well, you're going to do it like, no, we are never going to apologize. We have our partners who help us to develop. We're going to continue. And you are very right on one thing, Mr. Pham. When we started doing the lobby, we were doing it in the Petroleum Club in Houston. I never went to Washington. Recently is when really, we started going to Washington. I don't know why. I never went. It was the guys from Foreign Affairs. I only went to Houston. Went from Frankfurt to Houston, the technical committee meeting with the guys there, going to the rodeos, eating T-bone steak. And that was the thing. But the key thing was that I was able to meet the CEO of the company. So clearly one of the important things is that we need to go back to Houston. This is an oil and gas conference, energy conference. Those are the guys who have the funds. So you need to go there and speak to them in their face. And they will ask you, Minister Gabriel, if I'm going to be investing $200 million, I am going to recover? I say, yes. I'll give you the number of all these friends of you who live in Houston, and they'll confirm to you. And that's what the issue about reputations. The John Hess, the ExxonMobil, even the former Secretary of State, all of them, they will tell you, Equatorial Guinea, those guys respect the contracts. You sign something with them, do it. So clearly one of the things that has happened is that there has been this disconnect. We can blame it on the share. We can blame it about deciding that there's other way to make more business. And that is going to come back. And I can guarantee you, at least Equatorial Guinea, we are going back to get all those money that the shale guys have decided not to do anymore because of regulation and the rest. And they will say the same thing. Gabriel, this is my money. I want this return back. I say, no problem. Because one thing that is very important, anybody who is oil and gas, to be able to be successful and to be able to have oil, you need to drill. The drilling is very important. And not everybody can drill. You have people for China, Europe, they say they are drillers. They are oilmen. But when they do the drilling, they are all Americans. You have all these companies painted, they have the Total, the Chinese, but who is drilling? They're Americans. So clearly, those wildcard Americans are the ones who have to come back. Equatorial Guinea was discovered by Americans. Senegal discovery was by Americans. Ghana discovered by the Americans. Mozambique by Americans. Nigeria, they were the ones who made the discovery. So if today, the Irish too, of course, I forgot. The Irish were there too. So if we have to say that why Africa have oil and gas, it's thanks to the Americans. No, later, it's business. They sold it to third parties who came, and then they did the development. But clearly, the Americans have been responsible of our destiny that we have right now. Now, for them to decide that they want to leave, that's their own decision. I don't want to go into politics. It's like Iraq, Iraq. They complain all the time in the US. They did all this thing in Iraq, they sacrificed all that. Everybody's there in Iraq. So Africa is the same thing. You guys made all the discovery, and then I don't know why you guys decided to just leave and allow. It wasn't Total who was in Mozambique. It wasn't ExxonMobil. It wasn't Marathon who did in Equatorial Guinea. It was Walter. So what we need to do, we need to find those wildcatters, because those wildcatters are not waiting for the institution to tell them, yes, we have the money. They have their own check. They just sign it like that, and they go there. And I can guarantee you one thing. Once you make a discovery, everything changes. And from there, all that issue will disappear. So you need to drill more in South Sudan. We need to drill more in Equatorial Guinea. And you see how everybody changed. So with that, that's one thing I can say.
Well said.
I would let Minister.
Well, thank you so much once again. My last would really be to say a lot of changes are taking place in the Republic of South Sudan. The 2018 peace agreement has really given us the opportunity to reform not only the oil sector, but the entire process of how we do things. Today, I can be able to tell you that in the Ministry of Petroleum, there are 4 things that people talk about. One, we have developed a document called Local Content Regulation. CNPC subsidiary companies control more than 93% of everything. But we developed local content regulation to ensure the nationals participate in the services delivery, goods and services to the oil companies, in their training, capacity building, and all the related items that are needed to be addressed. It's not that our partners are happy with it, but that is the right thing to do. The second thing that we have done is that we came up with a document called Unified Human Resource Policy Manual. If you look at South Sudan today, and so many ministers told me the same is not happening where they came from, you will find a president of a company who is being paid $75,000 and that is cost oil money. That is from the companies that I told you earlier that are operating in the Republic of South Sudan. And we are trying to adjust that. But we are also trying to adjust the relationship between the employees and employer, because that's the aim of the document. Another important thing that we have done is an audit, cost recovery audit. Since, God knows, these companies have never been audited. Recently, we contracted Ernst & Young, KPMG, and they have done a fantastic job. And out of that is causing us a lot of trouble, because today we are saying the companies must pay back to the people of South Sudan almost $3.3 billion. This is money that the auditors found were used wrongly. And we say this money must be paid back to the government. Another important thing that we are doing is environmental audit. We are not apologetic about it. We are auditing the companies because there are a lot of claims of pollution of environment, and we cannot tell what to do unless we have carried out an audit, because an audit will give us the tool to maybe correct what we are doing wrong and as well as fix what has gone wrong. We have done those, and this is just to show you that there is change of attitude and that we want to do things differently. I want to end by saying it is a great opportunity to meet most of you are here. And I would humbly request all of you that, it's always best to meet the people and hear their stories. We have a man in the Republic of South Sudan, and I said it earlier in one of the panels. This man, one of the evening, kids were coming because we have cattle keepers in our country. They were looking after their goats. Then they were coming home in the evening. He made them. People believe that this man, he loved eating. He loved eating a lot. So he made these kids and he told them, listen, you see that tree? They say, yes. Say, I want you to go there. I have roasted some maize and fish. Go and eat. So the kids, they start running because they are hungry. He looked at them. They were so serious. He said, this may be true. He started running after them. But he was lying to them. But because they ran so fast, because they believe in him, he's an elderly person, they start running after him. A lot of his stories have also been told about South Sudan. It would be best that somebody also give themselves the opportunity to interact with South Sudanese and listen to their histories. Some may not literally be true, but because they are told by people that you believe like the whole man, then you may begin to believe those stories. I'm saying this because those of you that have come here, we need your help. I will be ready to go there. We have so many South Sudanese there. So many also have tried before I come in as a minister. But I'm not going to stop here. I will also try. I believe whoever come after me will also try because this is a public seat. Anybody can come anytime. But it's important for the U.S. to know that South Sudanese, not politicians, South Sudanese knew what happened exactly. Why we have a country today, they know the role that was played by the U.S. And they still remember that. And it would be wrong for somebody to say, well, to hell with you. I think there is need for us to sit on a table and have a discussion as to how things should move forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Dr. Pham, closing remarks.
Well, again, NJ, thank you for this forum. Thank you for this opportunity and for your commitment to this vision that I think we share, all share in this room, of Africa developing for itself and to the benefit of the world. And we can all on this one. And that really is the story that needs to be told in a time like this when ideologies about transition, et cetera, are being driven less by science, and more by ideology or, even, whatever you want to call it. We need that. We need the stories. We need the narratives. So I compliment you for pulling this off, and despite all the challenges, and I think it's important that we continue these conversations because this is how change happens. It's not going to occur overnight. I think anyone who tells you they can change it quickly, no. I mean, everyone's been kidding you, Minister, for being the Benjamin, the young, and increasingly you're making me feel old because I'm one of those who still remember Dr. Garang. Jack Danforth was a mentor of mine, and so I go back to that current history. And you're very correct. And this is a struggle not about the present, although we have to fight in the present. And this is a struggle about tomorrow, and what kind of tomorrow we can do. When we have, there was a graphic I saw the other day where it said the energy use. The average refrigerator, and I'm embarrassed to admit there are two in my home, the average American refrigerator consumes several times the energy just that an African consumes in a year.
Correct.
And if that alone should give us pause. Now I'm not getting rid of my second refrigerator. I'll tell you that. But that should give us pause. And as I said earlier about our history, we need to also learn to be a little less dogmatic, a little less, and also to face the reality of the world in which we live. And because Africa, and this is the challenge I place to you, your colleagues, and others, because Africa holds the key to that future in so many ways, not just the youthful demographic, but also the material keys to any energy transition, the keys to any carbon sequestration, hold so many keys. This is the time to make use of the tools that God, as the minister said, has given you. And I encourage you and invite you to do that, and to seek out those partners that you will find ready and willing in the United States, in Canada, in other countries that share our values.
Thank you. Congressman, you have the closing remarks.
And again, thank you so much for doing this and your vision and your team that put this together. It is truly an honor for me to be here at this moment, at this place with you. I mean, we had President Reagan once said that each generation goes further than the generation before it because it stands upon the shoulders of that generation. That is a very American ideal, and that is what we want inherently for all of Africa. So God bless you, God bless Africa, and let's get after it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Put your hands together for this great panelists.
Great, guys.
That was good.